In Iraq, in the ancient city of Nineveh, there was a great king and ruler known as Ashurbanipal. Ashurbanipal found up to 30,000 of these tablets and creating the greatest library ever known to history, and organized them based on categories, some being laws and rules from the different time periods, discussing agriculture and trade, others talking about human origin stories and these sky gods known as the Enuma or Anunnaki. The most significant of these tablets in terms of understanding the human origin story remains with 3 particular tablets known as the Atrahasis, the Eridu Genesis, and the Myth of Adapa. They describe something very different than we learn in history books, a story that goes back more than 13,000 years and perhaps up to 50,000 years, describing how humans were created like creator gods in the image of these sky gods known as the Enuma or Anunnaki. And they describe them as the gods who came down from heaven to earth. In some of these tablets discovered in the Ashurbanipal library was the greatest source of historical information in the world, giving us tablets such as the Sumerian King List, the Uruk list of kings and sages. And in these stories, in the Sumerian King List, Uruk list of kings and sages, and these king accounts from Berosus, we get information that comes together and agrees upon each other. Some of these kings are described as living and ruling for thousands of years. But what's so fascinating about that also, not only are the reigns important that carry over and agree in each one of these different sets of tablets and kings lists, but the cities they describe as being the 5 original pre-Diluvian cities match up in every single one of these tablets. And that's how we have to take this information and put it together and understand where the historical value is. The most famous book that George Smith wrote was known as the Chaldean account of Genesis. And in that book, he described the most important of these tablets, providing translations, but also something that others did not. And what he said is essentially that when he looked at every tablet, the only conclusion he could come to was that he called these celestial beings who came backwards and forwards to Earth. Now, what does that mean? It's almost a bizarre thing to say, backwards and forwards to Earth. And the more I studied and thought about this, the more I realized that it must be talking about different time periods in Earth history. Why do we know that? We know that because of several important tablets known as the Enuma Elish and the 7 tablets of creation. They describe these events that occurred early in Earth's history. In those tablets, it describes the early creation story of Earth and the celestial bombardment of different planets and the original planet name of something that existed nearby or even for Earth, it's unknown, known as Tiamat, in which a great catastrophe occurred in that planet. What's remarkable about those stories, it describes how these Enuma gods, with the great hero known as Marduk leading them, somehow were involved in those planets and the creation of the planet of Earth and the involvement of whatever Tiamat was. Now in the Atrahasis, it tells us the story from the last king of the last pre-Diluvian, meaning pre-flood, Younger Dryas cities, known as Shuruppak. The city of Shuruppak was ruled by a man named Ubaratutu, whose son was a bloodline ruler all the way up to connecting to Enki. And now this king went on to be the last ruler of the pre-Diluvian cities before they were all destroyed in a great catastrophe. And it's described how he left behind the greatest account of not only our human origin story, but the events of the flood, and later, how humans became mortal. In the Atrahasis, it first describes how the Enuma beings just came here. It doesn't say where they came from, it doesn't say what star system, what dimension, or even what universe. Our understanding of astronomy, agriculture, animal husbandry, studying the stars, mathematics, oral traditions and writing, everything came from those civilizations. But they don't state that they came up with it. They state that it was lowered from these Enuma beings.